Allô, bonjour, bienvenue. OK, on va commencer parce que je sais qu'on oh, on a 1 minute, désolé. Alors, bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. Merci beaucoup pour être ici. Just grateful to you all for being here. Please note that Jordan is with us and will be monitoring the chat box. So if you have questions, and also just feel free to unmute and ask questions as we go. Note that I'm trying to leave space at the end so that we have some time to ask questions perhaps then also. So today we're going to talk a little bit about using ÉCLAIR in French immersion, going to just kind of give you some practical information and then allow some time for Q&A. Alors là, l'AOPLV reconnaît que les activités de notre organisation et celles de nos membres se réalisent sur des terres des Autochtones. Nous sommes reconnaissants de pouvoir travailler et vivre sur ces territoires. Nous remercions les peuples Métis, Inuits et des Premières Nations qui prennent soin de ces territoires depuis ces temps immémoriaux et qui continuent de contribuer à la force de l'Ontario et des collectivités de la province. Nous voulons également reconnaître et faire l'honneur à la pérennité de la présence des Premières Nations, des Métis et des Inuits qui vivent sur ce territoire depuis des temps immémoriaux. I was very fortunate to be able to go to the ACP conference and just listen to some of those Indigenous perspectives and really, again, feel very fortunate that we're able to continue to support French as one of our as a language of instruction when so many languages have been lost, and that became extremely clear there. So considering Acadians, and I know we've talked about this before, but I just always think it's important for us to kind of just refresh. So remembering that those screeners tell us who needs help, the diagnostics, what that help should be, and then progress monitoring, is that help working? I just realized there's 3 ones on that slide. We'll fix that. Talking about just looking at the universal screening, I know I'm very happy to say that we have finally, like our first round of screening, we feel fairly confident that we are completed it with, other than those students that maybe have prolonged absences of months at a time, and those students that were exempt for multiple reasons. And so the screeners are done. And so now we're really looking at using those diagnostic assessments. So actually our interventionists have been out in schools for the past 2 days, working with students from 10 of our schools, because there are 10 of them that were through the screener identified as needing the support the most. And they are out doing the diagnostic assessments so that they can determine what skills need to be taught to those groups of students. And then from there, they're going to be using those progress monitoring tools once a week, because this is an intense intervention cycle, and looking at, is their instruction working or does it need to change? So again, just kind of sharing, and just because I sometimes when I say things, it might be out of context. So our goal, of course, was to follow the ministry mandate of screening all children in senior kindergarten through to grade 2. And our goal is that in the middle of year assessment that we will screen all senior kindergartens and grade 1s. That being we have a lot of classroom educators that are so inspired to gather the data because they find it extremely helpful. So we are hoping to build their confidence and in using the assessment tool, and also recognizing the importance of it. And there's nothing quite like doing it yourself. So though that being said, we do have interventionists that will be providing that support. And then grade 2s who did not meet benchmark, we will be doing that assessment. And then for our end of year, we're really hoping to do all grade 2s, just because we know the mandatory assessment period, it ends at the end of grade 2, and we want as much information as we can to support them as they move into grade 3. I know a lot of, especially our tier 3 decisions are made within that grade 3 year. So we want to make sure they're getting the supports that they need. And then students in grade 1 and senior kindergarten that are well below benchmark. So that is our ambitious tentative screening plan. And we are doing some research in the realm of screeners in FI also, so we're in some cases doing it in both languages. So I take us back to the decision-making tree because now that we have our Acadience data, this decision-making tree becomes very critical. So we actually use the tools that our board is currently using. So looking at Acadience Reading Français, ÉCLAIR, le CECR, and kind of developed what does it look like within GEC DSB based on the one that ONLIT provided. So now we have our Acadience and our Acadience Reading Français data. So now what? So our next step, of course, is to use ÉCLAIR. And I just want to kind of, again, celebrate this, I want to call it an achievement because it truly was to have so many people collaborating together to develop this research-based tool. So knowing that all children in all programs have the fundamental right to learn to read. An essential component is knowing the learner. So, éclairer le chemin vers la lecture pour chaque apprenante et illuminer la route. That's what éclair really stands for. And so really lighting that path to reading for every learner to illuminate the direction. And so that was because we knew a diagnostic tool was needed. And so with the financial support of the Ministry of Education, we were able to assemble this team of really intentionally selected members to embark upon this. So looking at specialized members from across the province in Canada with a variety of experiences and expertise. So knowing that this helped bridge research and practice. And there were so many conversations where it was quite clear that we don't always do that. So making sure that we do that and knowing that we're extremely grateful to everyone for their contributions, particularly the team at OISE, because they just invested so much time, and also the students and educators for their role in developing and piloting this assessment tool. So French immersion programs across Ontario have different points of percentages and instruction of French versus English, number of subjects taught. So ranging from kindergarten to grade 4, it looks really different across Ontario. So that was an interesting challenge for our team. And knowing that these programs become more reflective of the linguistic, cultural, and social diversity within our communities, including students with no prior reading instruction in English. The CEFR really helped provide us with a common understanding of that. And looking at, so this tool, ÉCLAIR, was designed to align to CEFR levels as opposed to grades, just to be responsive to the needs of each learner. That being said, I know within your own system, you may look to those grades and what does that look like? What are you hoping for by the end of senior kindergarten? What are your goals by the end of grade 1? And OISE had offered to actually create benchmarks for GCDSB because they had so much data. And I actually said, please don't do that right now. Maybe 3 years from now, once we've shifted practice and see, because those will be the benchmarks that we want to strive for, because there's so much happening so quickly in our learning and our growth. The one thing that I do want to point out and that has come up is that just knowing that this is not to replace any of the ministry screeners. So just want to be really clear, ÉCLAIR is not to do. It is to be used, can be used in tandem with screening tools to determine student strengths and inform those next steps for instruction. So I take us back to the reading rope, Scarborough's rope. And because we know that this tool focuses on that phonological awareness, phonics, and word reading, but know that I believe very, very strongly, and the team believes very, very strongly that oral language comprehension, interaction, and production are definitely a critical component of additional language learning and should be part of that assessment and instruction. I don't want to, it's not that we're only going to focus our time on that. We want to make sure that that oral language is part of every day, and noting that the CFR really uses that asset-based language to describe what each learner can do and inspires them to be confident and lifelong language learners. So looking at both components of that rope and making sure each of those strands is strengthened and developed over time. So this particular scope and sequence really looks at like the different subtests by grade, knowing that the model is based on programs with 100% French instruction. So that it might look different in your context, and that's okay. And if you're working with a student who's not been taught, you use your professional judgment to determine which skills to evaluate. Also note that these measures can all be used above and beyond grade 2, though it goes to grade 2 here. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're using it in other grades. So the components. So you will know there's a French guide, a French educator guide, an English educator guide. There are three versions, version A, B, and C. What's important to note, because I know I recently saw someone post, oh, I'm going to use C because I'm teaching grade 4 or 5. And it's like, that's not how they work. They're actually equivalent measures. So component 1 of version A is measuring a similar skill to version B, version C. Completely unlike a benchmark that moves over time. These are equivalent measures, so you're seeing if there's growth within that measure. For those of you that are very research oriented, you may wish to check out just the measures. They were they were actually validated with 776 students from kindergarten through to grade 3 in both summer and fall. So over time, just was a really great. Oops, I was going to put photos of our binders there. I'm going to keep going. Sorry. So looking at for the phonological awareness subtests, there's a script with practice items that's provided with an I do, we do, you do format. That being said, I can tell you, having administered many times, that you can use your professional judgment. If a child is ready to go, unlike Acadian's, the screener that we want to use and keep standardized into the script, with this, if you have a student that's ready to go before the I do, we do, you do, I can tell you there, I encountered several, that it's okay to move directly to the test items. And note that we did use the IPA just to avoid any confusion. I think over time we'll get much more comfortable with that. And the one thing that we did note, and you'll see here that taper les syllabes and fusionner les syllabes are included as appendices, sorry. Note that we discovered that the awareness of those larger elements of speech, they were interesting and might give us some more information about the students, but research really supports prioritizing that instruction at the phoneme level. So just kind of, that is why they're in there, but they are towards the back just to kind of provide additional information. But we know that those phonemes are going to tell us more about the later word reading skills at this level. So when we're looking at compétences 5 to 9, that we're looking at those word reading skills, and these have stop rules that go with them. You may choose to also, the one thing, especially I'm finding with kindergarten or students that maybe need smaller chunks of things to focus on. That's the one thing. You can break up each subtask on a separate occasion. And please read the instructions as you're going through. And the stop rule is really just there to support that you stop at a point where students are unlikely to continue to be successful with the task. So this is compétence 1. When we're looking at it, we can see it's fusionner les phonèmes. So you're saying the phonemes and the student is putting them together. There are 10 words here, and you'll note they start from more simple and become more complex. Compétence 2, on continue avec isoler le phonème initial. So that's where you're saying a word and the student is saying the first sound of the word. The team working with the researchers, they felt that 5 words was a good indicator of whether or not the student was actually able to isolate that initial phoneme. And if they're not, then we're going to talk a little bit more about what we might do in that case from there. Isoler le phonème final, so looking at that last sound within the word. So V, for example, is going to be E. And again, 5 words because the researchers did feel, and actually in our experience, once a student got it, they got it. And if they weren't getting it, they typically weren't able to get any or very few of the responses. Conscience phonologique, so segmenter les phonèmes. So you're saying a word and the students are segmenting it into phonemes. So you say boo, the students say b, oo. And there you'll see that it's there. My apologies. So the response is there as well as the API symbols. And back to 10 words because that, again, you'll see they start from a little bit more simple and they go to being more complex as far as number of phonemes. Jordan, please stop me if you at any time, because I know I'm kind of zooming through here. Nommer des lettres, pretty straightforward. And again, I think back to the Acadians piece, these are not connected directly to, but they are a strong predictor of later reading ability. So definitely want to make sure that we have an idea if they're able to do that. And identifier les sons des lettres. This one I find takes the longest and is best to chunk into separate pieces sometimes, especially because sometimes when you ask a student to tell you the letters and then you ask them to do the sounds, they have a hard time separating that. And I know if I were in a kindergarten classroom, I would definitely make sure I didn't do them at the same time. And you'll note that on the sound one, H is missing. We did have it on there, but left it off intentionally because especially having been when we were working with the research and going out into schools and trying it, different educators taught different things for how to say or not say the sound associated with ash. And so just to avoid any variance, we determined that we would not have the ash on there because il n'y a pas de son. Then looking at lecture de mots, and this is where the first stop rule comes into place. So looking at if the student reads 8 words or more correctly, then you go to the next card. So looking at card 1, so from va to partir, if they get 8 or more of those correct, you go to the next card, carte deux, where it's 2 letters, 1 sound, starting with ou and danseur. And then if they get 8 or more correct, you're going to go to the third card with trois lettres, un son, from beau to normaux. And then even if a student only got to card 1, we did start with card 4 with them as part of the research, just those irregular words. And they're, as you can see, they're very irregular. So I can be honest with you that most students that didn't get 8 words correctly on card 1 were really struggled with card 4. So that's where with being a diagnostic, you can use that professional judgment. And at the bottom corner there, you'll see the student facing tools that are part of the assessment. And then looking at the non-mot, you'll see here we have 3 cards again, but there's also a sample practice, and it's the same. So anyone that's doing compétence set, so the words, I also recommend they do compétence suite. So if you're a grade 2 educator and you've got someone struggling, I always recommend do set A-weets because there are students that can read real words, but aren't able to read nonsense words, and we want to definitely check that just to see if they're truly decoding. And so you'll also note there's a modèle de prononciation. So which real word are you looking for that to sound like? And it's funny because I know when we very first started into the research, an educator thought that students had to read both words because she had that paper. And so we've tried to make sure that that doesn't occur and that that's clear, that that's just an idea of what that word should sound like. And then, so I know in our school board, what we did, we have these lovely binders, and this is what I was supposed to put a picture of on there. My apologies. And in it, we have our manual at the front. And then inside we have the manual in French and English, because sometimes I might be in a building and the speech language pathologist asks me, what is it you're doing exactly? Or the administrator who maybe doesn't speak French asks me, what is this all about? So I can show them what it's all about, and I have it ready to go in my hands. Then we have version A, and in behind version A, we have the just the page protectors with the student-facing material. And we decided to do the nonsense words on a different color of paper than the real words, just so if I was there and I was maybe new to it, I was able, or just to keep things a little bit organized for you, and each of them say whether they're from A, B, or C. So if you get your whole binder drops on the floor and everything falls out, you're able to put it back together again without any trouble. Then looking at lecture de mots, but the lecture de phrases, so the student phrases are there. And you'll note here, it talks about how many words were read correctly and which keywords were read correctly. So that is an important part to note because those are the words that really connect to the skills that we're looking for within those sentences. And again, you have the student-facing materials for that. So again, we're looking at how are we going to determine those individual needs. So I have here in front of me just sort of a sample of what it looked like for this class, looking at a grade 2 class. And if you were the educator, just looking at this, take a moment and think about who would you want to use Eclair with first and why? Just give you a moment. So I can tell you right now, our interventionists are definitely out there looking at the students that are 18, 23, 28, 23. Those are their first kind of, and working through and doing the diagnostic assessment with as many students as they can. And it's not that you would never ever do the assessment with the students that are green, but definitely want to start with those students that are red so that you can start that tier 2 support with them right away in the classroom. And I see something in the chat. Are your interventionists providing support in French or English? Our interventionists are providing support in French at this time. We do have students in grade 2, they start to learn English, but we made the decision to support them in French because that has been their language of instruction from kindergarten through to grade 2. I know it looks very different across the province when it comes to that, but we were very fortunate to have 4 of our 10 interventionists are bilingual and are able to support the screener and the intervention in both French and English. When it came to looking at the data, we really tried to make sure that we were looking at the data in as equitable a way as possible. So actually crossed it over so that it was truly the top 10 schools, not looking at, oh, let's find the top 6 English and the top 4 French. We looked at the top from the top, and of the 10, 2 of them have French immersion or dual track French immersion schools that are getting that 5-week intensive cycle of support. The other chart I find extremely helpful when we're having this is looking back at from your Acadians Reading Français training manual, just knowing, okay, so this is the skill that perhaps the student needs extra support for. So what is it I'm going back to support them with? That's critical. So here's just an example of grade 2. And we have here, we can see these students and wondering where, if this was your grade 2 class, where would you start with Éclair? So looking at the compétences from 1 jusqu'à 9, where would you start? So I do believe in wait time, but I do want lots of questions at the end. So, so I can tell you where we're actually starting. We're starting with compétences 5 et 6. My apologies, sorry. We're starting with compétences 7 et 8, and then we're working backwards from there. So if the student is not successful with card 1 in either set or in both 7 et 8, we're working backwards and then working back as far as compétence 1, because we know, and I don't want to say back, but working that way with those students in grade 2. That being said, it looks a little different. Oh, and then of course, sorry, as we're working with them, we're very fortunate to have some copies of Next Steps in Literacy instruction, and we're using that in alignment with Sonograph to provide that intensive intervention, and also supporting educators with those conversations about, okay, this is where your student is, this is what that support could look like, some effective strategies to support that. And again, using those progress monitoring tools, because it's great to do all these things, but if it's not working, we need to know so we don't end up completely in the wrong direction. So knowing if it's working or if we need to change it. So the tools from Acadians Reading Français are available, and I know we're very excited that they are available. So, for example, with this is just facilité à reconnaître le premier son, might be something that you're definitely needing to use with some of those students that are demonstrating that. Sorry, I'm looking. And Jordan, I think we do know that that book is available there, isn't it, in the library?
It 100% is available on the OCT library. I'm not sure about digital format, but it is definitely available to get from the OCT library.
Thank you very much. And looking at our students in grade 1 that are in the red, we definitely opted to start at the beginning just to see how those students are making out with their phonological awareness skills. That being said, the student that you see there in the middle, you may choose to start with the words again and work backwards, but definitely with the students that are red in grade 1, we're starting at the very beginning. And in kindergarten, I would always start at the very beginning and just with all students through the course of the year in senior kindergarten, be working through all of those. And again, looking at that next steps in literacy instruction for support. So we've had a lot of great conversations about what does this look like after grade 2. So we are trying something using ÉCLAIR. We're actually dictating the cards to students just to see. So in especially grades 6 to 8, we have some students and we know they weren't taught this way. So we kind of want to get a quick snapshot of who do I need to find out more about as a reader? So what we actually have educators are trying is dictating the cards, not all 7 cards at once, but dictating the cards, particularly 1, 2, and 3 for the real words and 1, 2, and 3 for the nonsense words, and seeing what their students are producing from that. And then any students that demonstrate that they require additional support, they're going back and actually using a different version of the reading screener to see how they're able to read. So we're kind of using encoding to check their phoneme grapheme connections, and then going back to the decoding to see if that's to see maybe where we need to support them with specific skills. So again, and I know Jordan has shared these books before, but we have the Untangling Database Decision Making and Next Steps in Literacy Instruction. And we're finding Next Steps in Literacy. I love both books, but right now Next Steps in Literacy Instruction is a great, super practical resource to support where we are right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I know there's a lot of people here and I know I just talked a lot. I want to open the floor now because it was just a brief information session, but to questions that you might have right now. Oh, sorry, Jess. I thought you asked a question because I was double screening it. You were telling the answer. No questions. All right.
I have one, Angeline. Sorry, it took me a
Yes.
while to figure out how to unmute myself. I'm not familiar with Zoom. So I understand the purpose of the screener, and I understand why we do it. What I don't understand is, and I was talking to our early literacy consultant at my board, and she was explaining to me, so we do the screener, the Acadians screener, and we find out based on the data who needs the support in which areas. And then we make our groupings based on the data. And then we administer intervention that way. So when do we use the diagnostic then?
So for example, grade 2, they're only doing for beginning of year, it only looks at nonsense word fluency and oral reading fluency. So you may have a student that is still not able to recognize the first phoneme in a letter. So that is where the diagnostic is going to help you go back and pick the specific skill that the student requires additional support with.
Okay.
So I want, like, thinking of that chart from Acadience, the one, the purple one that links the assessment to skills.
Yes.
That's
yes.
where we want to go and spend some more time in that space.
So teachers are going to administer interventions based on the data from Acadience and organize their groupings according to the skills that need to be taught. And if their instruction is still not working, then they administer the diagnostic.
We're flipping it for grade 2 and 1 at this time because the Acadian screener tells us a lot, but it doesn't go, especially for
Right.
the grade 2s with the nonsense word fluency and oral reading fluency. It could be that the student is still not able to blend and segment phonemes or recognize the first or last phoneme in a word. So they're, or maybe not even identifying letters and sounds. So the nonsense word fluency, we don't know where that's happening. And especially because the nonsense word fluency may not check even for all 26, well, not 26, but all of the graphemes, right? And Jordan, I'll let you speak because I see you have something.
I was just going to add the Acadian screener is really meant to tell you whether there's an issue or not, like red flag or not. And the data does give you enough information that you could quickly work from groups. But you would do a diagnostic when you need to, first off, validate that information, because we do know that, you know, sometimes kids are having a bad day. Sometimes there are kiddos that we're curious about. Even some of our kids that meet the benchmark, we're just like, that just doesn't seem quite right. I want to know a little bit more about them. That's when we would pull out that diagnostic. It's also going to answer the Acadience answers the question of who. The diagnostic answers the question of what. Right? So who I need to teach is going to come from my Acadience screener. It's going to be like, I need to teach these kiddos. This is the group that they're in, but I need to know exactly what I'm going to teach them. And that's where that diagnostic piece is going to come in and say, these are the skills we need to work on, or more specifically within those skills, these are the exact phonemes that we need to work on, and we can go from there. So it just gives us more depth. We don't need to do it with everybody in the way that we do that screening at the beginning, because it does take more time. But it really is designed to tell us that what.
So the recommendation is that teachers administer the diagnostic once they receive the data from the screener from Acadience.
So you're going to look at your screening data. Some screening data is going to come back and you're going to be like, whoa, these kids need to work on phonemic awareness. It's very clear. I can start working with that group right away. These 5 kiddos, I need to know a little bit more about. So I'm going to do that diagnostic right away and find out what to teach. These kiddos are on track. I'm going to go ahead and just work with them in a group. But then maybe 3 months down the line, my first group, okay, I got that very clear red flag sorted out. I need to know what's next. That's when I might consider doing that diagnostic with them. It doesn't have to be like the screener that I do at the beginning of the year for everybody. It's something I can do on an as needed basis.
And Jordan, I'm thinking about, remember, I don't know if you remember my data from last year though, where it was very clear that the grade 1 class wasn't making, they knew their letter name, they didn't have that sound piece. And so knowing that, you're going to use that screener data, you may even use to inform like whole group instruction, but then looking at that diagnostic as needed.
So Julie, you would use a diagnostic as needed, but generally you wouldn't do it as often because it takes so long. Because you're really getting that in-depth information, you could have enough on there to give you a to-do list that would last you pretty much your entire school year. So you could do it once, or you could do it more often if you came to a point where you're like, I have questions, I need to know a little bit more.
And yeah, thanks. And as there are 3 versions, the different components too, right? 3 versions and the different components as needed. Are all of your boards encouraging the use of the Acadience progress monitoring materials? I can't speak for all of our boards, but I know that we definitely are.
The other boards that I'm working with in the province are for sure, especially as we get further into this. Screening is so new. Screening really just, everybody just got that screening out of the way. And now they're like, okay, what comes next? And I am working with boards and we're doing that, what does come next? piece. And that's where the progress monitoring, and that's where we're seeing a lot of really good data coming for us. Angeline, can you go over the 3 versions for
So,
ÉCLAIR again?
so 3 versions. So for, I think probably the easiest way to put this is for compétence 1 is blending phonemes. So when you do compétence 1, whether it's version A, B, or C, the difficulty level is the same. It doesn't get harder from A to B to C. So it's equivalent, it's measuring equivalent things. So I don't know if any of your boards use QPS, but that was part of the inspiration for that model, so that you don't have students and educators kind of teaching to those words that are part of that measure, so that you have something fresh each time. And even as I said, for our older grades, we're trying that encoding piece, so they're not going to use that same one to check the students' decoding abilities. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly it. More options, so not to repeat the same words. But if you look at, for example, compétence 1, the words from 1 to 10 across the 3 versions, you'll see some similarities in number 1. They both have like the 2, right? And then as we go further down to number 10, you'll see that there's definitely more phonemes in those words. So you'll see a lot of similarities. So if you look at the research component, they actually looked at that across the measures and had us, they even had to switch a word or 2 after actually having used it in the classroom or with students. Any other questions? That's a really, someone is asking about sonograph rather than CBE. I would say that if you're using one or the other, that's wonderful. I spoke to a really wonderful, dedicated young educator who was told she should be using both. I do not recommend that. They both follow a scope and sequence. They both have routines in place. So I especially won't recommend one over the other, because I happen to have my heart and sweat and tears in one. But no, it's not that one over the other. We very much stuck to a lot of the beliefs. I say beliefs, the thinking more so behind the creation of UFly when we created Sonograph, which CBE followed the routines, but not necessarily all of that. So that's what I'm going to say to that. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, because again, I'm biased, but I'm not, because we actually met with the people creating CBE very early on, but they were tied to a scope and sequence through the Calgary Board of Education that was already pre-created for them, and they had started their work and we had already started our work, so we couldn't align even if we wanted to, though. They are lovely and working so hard, and they're great. And the other thing is they have across for the Calgary Board of Education, the programs for immersion all look the same, whereas we're working within a whole different context than that. Yes, so the English partner doing UFly every day as well. The one thing, we actually have educators that are using both right now in their classroom, particularly grade 2. Our goal is that most students are actually through to the end by the end of grade 1, and then just reviewing in grade 2. But and all they're doing is they're staggering days. So the new skill in English doesn't land on the same day as the new skill in French. So that's what they're doing. And then that 5th day is always a new day. So and they're finding it's working. And your FI starts in grade 2 now, so you'd be starting. Yeah, I think too, we're just, as we move things along, right? Things, as I said, the grade 2 educator is doing both right now, but hopefully in grade 1 it'd be done, and then when we start English, that would work. And I'm quite excited to say, and I'll talk about it December 4th for our sonograph session, but I did just meet with UFly, and I'm sorry these things take time, but I'm really excited to see where they're going, because they're super supportive of all that's happening with sonograph, and I'm excited about some of the things we just talked about the other day to share with you once they're ready. Just need more minutes. So back to ÉCLAIR and diagnostic assessment. Any other questions, thoughts? It is a Zoom meeting as well for Sonograph, Angela. It's because it goes through OMLTA, so that's how they do their meetings. We do not have a senior team looking at ÉCLAIR data at this point. Like I say, our interventionists are finding it extremely helpful, and we're actually gathering together tomorrow to kind of look at, okay, how are like these groups, because even as Jordan said, within ÉCLAIR, we may find it might tighten the groups that we're working with. So Acadians gives us an idea of groups. I'm thinking especially of the English, the ALO. It groups students according to, but within that group, we may have two subgroups, right? So thinking of it a little bit that way. And ÉCLAIR may give us that piece of information. And then the progress monitoring will help us kind of determine if that's working. So we are just keeping it with the teacher at this time. Long answer, sorry, Julie. Been a day. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you for your time. Just a reminder that there is the Sonograph session on December 4th from 4 till 5. And then we're the OMLTA conference on April 4th and 5th. And we know we're having some reading, a reading network piece component of that. And just grateful to the Ministry of Education for their financial support to make these types of things happen. And thank you very much, Julie. I know Jordan and I continue to strive, as do you. Like, thank you for being here and taking your time after hours.
And just to let everyone know, if you are registered for this session, you will automatically receive the link for the next session. You're just registered for the reading network, so you'll get them all, whether you sign up or not. So
You're
no
stuck
need
with
to
us.
reach out.
Well, thank you all very much for your time. Have a wonderful evening.